There are 5 huge flaws with the common retirement plan that almost everyone is planning on using. And almost no one is talking about these 5 flaws. In this video, I'll cover these flaws and then I'll tell you what you can do about them near the end of the video so you can make sure your financial future is secure. Most retirement planning is based on withdrawing 2%, 3%, 4% from your retirement savings every single year to live in retirement. Now, these percentages are based on various studies that have been done that show how long these withdrawals should last based on how much you take out, what percent. But there are 5 serious problems with this plan that really concern me that I want to share with you in this video so you can make sure that you've got enough money to live how you want for life when you do decide to retire. Hi, my name is Camille Gaines. Welcome to Retire Certain. This channel is all about helping people first build wealth with slightly alternative methods that don't take decades and slightly outside of the box thinking. And 2, creating diversified income streams so you can enjoy life both now and later on after you retire. Now back to those 5 things that scare me about the more traditional retirement withdrawal method that many people are planning on. First, the retirement withdrawal method may not work because, well, there may not be enough money to withdraw the amount that you've planned on withdrawing. Now, these studies that support withdrawing 2%, 3%, or 4%, they're all based on best guesstimates. That's all we have with investing. So the guesstimates are about how much investment return investors will get from a typical stock and a bond portfolio in the future. The problem is that investment returns can vary greatly depending on the economy and the related stock market cycles that happen during retirement. So I'll talk more about what you can do about this uncertainty near the end of this video. But now I want to back to what I want to share with you about these problems with the retirement savings withdrawal plan. The next problem, number 2, is the retirement withdrawals are based on something we have been taught not to do our entire lives, right? It's spend our savings. Don't spend your savings. So I don't know about you, but I don't think it would feel too good to withdraw from our investment savings every month to live at age 65 to pay all of our bills when we know we could be around for another 25 years or more. That makes me a little uncomfortable. I've had it ingrained in my head not to spend my savings. And I know it doesn't feel good to spend your savings, right? And so I think that the guilt and the stress from spending your savings will be, it will take the enjoyment out of having the money and out of being retired. And I think also that anytime that we would plan to do something that is fun, that costs money, then I would be worried. I would have in my brain, do we have enough money? Can we afford this? This just doesn't feel right. And I think that it just will cause a huge problem for most people that are planning on living on retirement withdrawals from their savings account for the rest of their lives. The thing is, if you retire when you're 65 and you live for 30 years, you're going to be making 360 retirement withdrawals while you're retired. And that feels like a lot of repetitive, negative thoughts about spending your money and about spending your hard-earned savings. So that's the second reason. The third reason is that inflation eats away the value of your money every single year. The amount of withdrawals you make each year will need to be adjusted for inflation for those who are planning to live off of their retirement withdrawal plans. Now, while we can estimate inflation based on history, we don't have a long-term precedent for the consequences of the government printing all this money. But we do know that the printing of money causes inflation. If you're like me, inflation, it sort of feels like those economic things, one of those vague but not real threats. But it is a real threat. Let's look at the price of movies as an example. It's a great way to make it more real. So let's say it cost about $5, or it did cost about $5 to go to the movie back in 2000. Just 20 years later, it costs $9. That's an 80% increase in 20 years. And 20 years it's a reasonable, if not too short time to plan on retirement, right? So let's compare this to the cost of a movie ticket for someone who is 65 when they retire and they want to go to the movies when they're 85. That would be a good thing to do when you're 85, I think. Based on history, the ticket cost would go from $9 to over $16. What if everything you buy costs 80% more 20 years after you retire? You can see how this is a serious problem. There's a good chance that this will happen based on facts, based on history, and math, my favorite investing and planning tools. So this is a serious problem with planning to live off of retirement withdrawals. 4, you won't know if your retirement withdrawals your plan worked until it's too late to do anything about it. This means you could discover your plan isn't working when you're 80 years old and you have to return to work. This is scary, but there is a way to avoid this uncertainty, which I'll address later in this video. First, I want to stay focused on why I don't like just planning on retirement withdrawals after we stop working. They just don't always work. Number 5 is the success of retirement withdrawal plans depend on factors that are way beyond our control, such as the stock market, the bond market, interest rates, inflation, and even tax rates. While you can control your spending, you can't control these other factors: the economy, the politicians, or how most of your investments will perform, unless you're in some sort of fixed income product that usually hinders investment returns. For example, if someone with money in stocks had retired in 2000, they would have seen a decade of horrible stock market performance, which would have seriously hurt their retirement plan, since their stock investments would have taken a huge hit from the 2 bear markets in the early 2000s and then again in the late 2000s, around 2007, 2008, early 2009. So on the other hand, someone who had retired at, say, 2020, early 2020, would have gotten off to a great start, and because they were headed into a long, long rise in the stock market from 2010 to 2020. We just don't know exactly, and who wants to plan on that uncertainty? Now, again, I do like to use facts and history to help me plan and invest. The fact is, though, the economy expands for a long time, and then it contracts for a shorter time. And the stock market rises and it falls as a result of those cycles. These are the facts. And the past 2 bear stock markets have had drops of well over 50%, as you may have seen here on my other videos. That was for the major stock market indices. The popular NASDAQ index dropped 70% in the early 2000s. Let's remember that most real estate values also rise and fall based on the economy. So homeowners take another hit to their net worth during recessions and related bear markets. Most of you remember the real estate crisis in the late 2000s. Unfortunately, it wasn't our first rodeo, since we had invested in quite a few other bear markets at our age. But we did take some painful hits, like almost everybody else, except for the guy in the movie The Big Short, Michael Burry, who made a fortune because he was paying attention and shorted overvalued investments. Sorry, I digress. It's a great movie. Anyway, I'm very passionate about this topic because those bear markets were the decade right after my husband Larry stumbled into, as we like to call it, early retirement. And at the time, we were invested in traditional stocks and bonds using an asset allocation, but we saw that that just wasn't going to generate enough income for us to live, and we didn't want to start retirement. We didn't want to plan on retirement withdrawals, and certainly not early retirement. And we didn't want to plan on that to live for the rest of our life. So our solution, we call it Plan B, to live well in retirement after those 2 nasty bear markets and after seeing what the income was from a traditional portfolio in stocks and bonds, what we decided to do was create income streams and alternative income streams that have served us well. And this is what I write about on my blog at retirecertain.com and here on my channel. I like to share what we learned on that adventure. This was when I learned to invest with facts, historical data, and probability and math instead of investing with emotions, which can lead us to the wrong decisions. So the fact is that if you're invested in stocks and bonds, they will rise and fall in value based on economic cycles, if not other factors that are also way beyond your control that will affect your retirement savings if you're invested in those assets. Home values will also be affected by these cycles, and that affects your net worth. The fact is also that we just don't know exactly when this will happen during our retirement years, which can be several decades, but we can get a pretty good idea as we head into retirement based on what the economy is doing during that time and what has happened over the past decade. It's just harder to plan 20, 30 years out. It's interesting that in 2010, after the two bear markets of the 2000s, the financial industry said to plan on withdrawing 2% to live to maybe 3% to live in retirement instead of that previous 4%. Stocks and real estate have very logically increased in value subsequent, after the years after the 2000, that big correction starting in 2009 as it's risen. So the economy expanded, stock market has gone up. Then after the stock market has risen for many years, now so many in the financial industry are returning to the recommended 4% with retirement withdrawals, just as retirement planning for investors should really be more conservative and should be based on lower withdrawals. But what really concerns me about all this is that withdrawing 2% versus 4% can be the difference of having money to live when you're 80 versus running out of money. Your life can dramatically be affected by a 2% versus a 4% retirement withdrawal. Know your own numbers. Have your own plan based on what's important to you, to whether or not, and this is true whether or not you work with a financial advisor. And if you work with a financial advisor, then a good financial advisor will welcome your attention to this. Let them know you're concerned and that you want to plan for your future, and don't assume that a retirement withdrawal plan based on studies are going to pay your bills for life. Now that you know the 5 reasons why you may not want to rely completely on withdrawing from your savings account to live for the majority of your retirement years, you'll want to see my video on ways that you can work around this. So watch this video next to see that. In the meantime, build wealth, create income streams, and enjoy life.